Our next session, Champion the Clean Economy, Corporate Action, and Protecting the Freedom to Invest. Please welcome Mindy Lubber, CEO, Ceres.
Thank you for joining us here at the Nest. It is a beautiful place. It is part of what literally this year are over 1,000 events on climate change. Some of us may say, does this make any sense? 1,000 events, too many dinners, we know too much traffic running around the city like chickens with our heads cut off. But what I predict will come from all this activity, the discussions on policy, on technology, on risk and opportunity, on what the financial market should do about this. What will come out of this week, I believe, because of all of you, is the fact that acting on climate is unstoppable, that the private sector is in all the way, and while there's much to do, we are on our way. So thank you. We've got to keep the momentum going. There is no question. 1,000 events are a lot, but the short message, the single, simple message, is we are unstoppable in where we're going. I am Mindy Lubber, the president and CEO of Ceres, a nonprofit that for 35 years has worked to integrate sustainability into capital markets. We work with over 100 companies, over 200 investors, to make sure that we're looking at the risks and the opportunities, and they are integrated from the boardroom to the supply chain. That's it. When you think about climate change, nature loss, water scarcity, and pollution, they all pose incalculable risks to capital markets, as well as unlimited opportunities. In my short 5 minutes, I want to talk about those risks, the opportunities, and some of the headwinds that we're facing where we need all of you to join us in pushing back. So let's start with the risks. The risks have never been so clear. From water shortages to heat waves to insurance markets, we are seeing the multi-billion-dollar impacts of climate change each day. In the US, we've seen $182 billion in economic damages in 2024, have already seen $93 billion in 2025. The risk couldn't be more clear. And the opportunities as well could not be more clear. Globally, clean energy and the grid, investments are projected to reach $2.2 trillion in 2025, twice the amount expected to flow into fossil fuels. And over the past 5 years, clean energy investments have more than doubled. I can keep going on the opportunities. They are there, they are clear. We'll hear from Tony Davis, a brilliant investor, shortly on the opportunities. But that's what we're seeing. For capital markets, there's so much moving forward. But there's also now headwinds that we're going to talk about now in our next panel that's making it a little bit more difficult for private sector leaders to move. So first, let me talk about how the response is, and then I'll talk about those headwinds. We're seeing headwinds suggesting that acting on climate is a breach of fiduciary duty rather than a responsibility, that acting on climate is something corporations ought not to do, despite the fact they know acting on it is about value add. Those things do not make sense, and while they are slowing things down, we are still seeing encouraging signs that the private sector isn't slowing down. We're seeing huge sums of domestic and global investment in clean energy. Companies are overwhelmingly staying the course. They are setting goals and they are moving towards them. Yes, it is true. Some of them are not speaking out because of repercussions. Some of them are not as public in signing on to campaigns and what they're going to do. But our job together, and the data shows it as well, is that companies and investors understand the need to act on climate because of the financial risks and the opportunities. Think about this. Just this month, corporate support was crucial to securing an extension of California's nation-leading cap-and-trade program. It was the company voice and investor voice that pushed it over the line. These are financial issues. Businesses and investors know the truth that acting on climate is no longer about compliance or reputation management. It is about profit and resilience. It is about materiality and not just morality. It is about jobs in the economy and building a clean energy revolution. So we need to know there are pushbacks here in the United States particularly, but growing, where there are 135 bills to trying to suggest that asset owners can't consider climate risk. There are 9 bills in Congress just last week suggesting that shareholders should lose their right to file shareholder resolutions and engage with companies. We know we don't have to agree on everything, but we should agree about this. Investors' responsibility to prudently manage risk is not a political issue. This cannot be about politics. We are hosting today people from every side of the political spectrum. This is not about politics, to say it again. And we've got to make the case that this incursion into free market and telling markets what to do and how to do it makes no sense, and that the risks and the opportunities are what makes sense. So I'm going to close by saying, yes, we live in interesting times. The private sector is moving forward, operating with risk and opportunity in mind. And we're here to showcase the opportunities, the success stories, but the need to work together to take this out of the political demand, to show that acting in climate is a clear guide for our future economy. Thank you so much. It's great to have you here, appreciate it. And I'm now going to introduce Tony Davis. Tony Davis runs Inherent Capital, an investment firm that looks at opportunities and risks. But Tony is also the co-chair of Ceres. And what I think about Tony is the eternal optimist, somebody who is out there looking at opportunities for investment, finding them, and keeping hope alive, showing us what we can do with smart investments as we move forward. Thank you so much for having me and for joining us. And now let me invite Tony onto the stage. The thing I said about Tony, and then I'm going to quickly turn this over to him, is that his optimism knows no bounds. He's not missing the problems, but he is out there finding the solutions that we're all eager to find. Our work with some of the largest public pension funds, where they're making $100 billion commitments to a clean energy future, to the smaller investors, venture investors, investors in every asset class, are looking for the opportunities, and it's those opportunities that will move us forward. Tony, what's going on out there, and what gives you so much optimism?
Well, thanks. First, it's great to be here. There are a few things. I mean, no doubt it is a challenging moment, and we'd like to see better policies from this administration. But I think the biggest news today that we're observing is the increase in energy demand related to new technologies, and in particular to artificial intelligence and data center growth. And in that context, what we're seeing last year is 90% plus of all new generation additions were renewables. And why is that? It's actually not because they're green. It's because it's better technology. They're cheaper, and they also provide energy security. Your counterparty is the sun, instead of your counterparty being a country that could choose to weaponize its fossil fuel exports. So we think that trend will continue, and that we'll continue to see renewables take the lion's share of energy generation growth going forward. There are other areas that we're excited about where we're investing today. One is energy efficiency, and at the same time as we're seeing demand increase, we're seeing the price of electricity increase. It's making energy efficiency investments even more compelling than they were 2 years ago. And by that, I mean we're really attacking the demand side of the equation. So think demand response programs, think the built environment, old technologies like insulation and better windows, new technologies like smart building management systems, smart metering, heat recovery and use in industrial processes, cogen. There's a relative lack of capital formation in the energy efficiency space, which typically leads to better kind of risk return opportunities. And they're not as easy, these opportunities are not as easy to scale and rinse and repeat as renewables, but we find it very, very compelling. The other real benefit of investing in efficiency is, as you probably know, some 2/3 of primary energy is lost in the conversion to its end use. So if you can deal with the demand problem directly, it has really an outsized impact on emissions. So we are finding a lot of really interesting places to invest at the moment. Natural capital is another area where it's an industry that's somewhat out of favor at the moment. It's the cheapest way that we know of to remove carbon from the atmosphere. We can develop very high quality afforestation and reforestation projects and remove carbon at $20 to $30 per ton. And as we heard from the senator recently, we think there's a real chance that carbon gets priced in a meaningful way in the not too distant future. And if you believe IPCC's estimates, that needs to be at $100 to $200 per ton to really affect meaningful change in our carbon consumption behavior. So if you can build it at $20 to $30 per ton and sell it at 100 plus, those are great investments, and it's the ultimate triple bottom line because it also really benefits local communities and it benefits nature and biodiversity. So we're excited about that space as well.
There are enough investments to go around. As more and more large institutional investors make commitments, small investors, is the timing right for making these investments? Are there enough out there? What do you see?
I think the timing is right. I mean, I think the march towards decarbonization is inexorable because I think the economics are better, and I also think that the effects of climate change are just becoming more and more evident, regardless of the rhetoric that we hear. One doesn't have to believe in science anymore to believe in climate change. We just have to read the news or open our windows or talk to a farmer. And I think that the cost of climate change, of the wildfires in California, floods in Texas, hurricanes in Florida, the cost will make it such that combating climate change isn't a political decision, it's just an economic reality, in my opinion. So I think now is a good time. I think investors and corporates have to think long term. It's not about, we don't think in terms of what's going to happen during this administration. We think about what's going to happen over multiple years and trying to discount those cash flows and those scenarios back to today.
You mentioned a minute ago, and I know you're not here as a political person, but something that makes extraordinary economic sense in the markets, and that is pricing carbon. What are you seeing around the world? Is there any chance we might be able to keep that concept alive and growing and moving forward here in the United States?
I'm optimistic just for a couple reasons. I mean, one, I think it just will become increasingly clear what the externality and the cost of carbon emissions is. We're also seeing, and maybe I'll mention the great work that Ceres has just done in California around the extension of the Cap and Invest program. Once these programs get into place, the revenues that they generate are meaningful. And so we're seeing other jurisdictions, again, as the senator alluded to, around the world that are now considering advancing these kinds of programs. They generate meaningful revenues. And oh, by the way, if you're not pricing your carbon and you're shipping goods or services to their jurisdictions, they're going to charge you for that. And so I think that will make every sort of jurisdiction want to have a price on carbon so that they can keep those revenues at home. So this, I think most economists would agree it's one of the most important things that we can do to allow the market to sort of properly price these externalities and to move forward with really thoughtful investment. I'm hopeful. As you say, I am sometimes a bit of an optimist.
A good thing indeed. At every event that I've been at, probably many of you have been hearing about AI nonstop. We hear about AI as it relates to content, materials, and so on. But we know that AI also is a great user of energy and of water. Ceres just released a report this week on the amount of water needed for AI to keep it going, and a problem we need to look at, act on, and address. But there seems to be an insatiable need for more energy. Can we meet that demand? Can we meet that need? How do we go about the fact that demand is growing, and we've got to make sure that everybody can afford and have access to energy?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, the competition in AI, to a certain extent, it's about models and chips, but it's also a competition around energy. And China added 430 gigawatts of renewable power last year. I mean, just a shocking number. So the estimate is that they've spent $10 to $15 billion on fusion research in the last few years alone. So I'm optimistic because of renewables. We also see emerging baseload technologies that are approaching commercialization. So think enhanced geothermal, which is a baseload energy source. Think fusion, which we've been talking about now for years, but in some ways, because of AI or with enhanced compute and enhanced material science, we think fusion will become a commercial reality in the next 5 to 10 years. So these are emission-free baseload technologies, which is what you really need. And as I'm sure you know, some of the pushback that you get against renewables. So, and the opportunity there, I think, from an investment standpoint, is both to own the equity in these new technologies, but also there's a huge credit and debt financing opportunity. And so the infrastructure level financing that will be needed, and you hear folks refer to first of a kind, but the investors that are willing to lean in and take some of that risk in these first of a kind financings, I think will earn outsized risk return. And many of those technologies will be substantially de-risked by the time they get to final investment decision.
The eternal optimist. There is no question we are seeing great things in the private sector despite pushback, despite headwinds, despite blowback. The risk is real. Investors are acting. Companies are integrating sustainability, climate risk, water risk into all that they do. As the attacks politically come, I think it's up to all of us to stand up, to speak out, to eventually call for things like a price on carbon. Might not happen in the United States in the next 2 weeks, but around the world, the momentum is extraordinary. I just came from Singapore. I've been in Europe recently. This is full speed ahead because this is about building a better and greater economy. Thanks so much to all that you're doing to help us get there. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Yes. Our next panel is Center-Right Perspectives, Protecting the Freedom to Invest.
My name is Andrew Collier, and I'm the Director of Freedom to Invest at Ceres. We started this initiative about 3 years ago, and when we started, we wanted to take a Big Tent approach. We reached out to organizations from the far right to the far left to find common ground about fiduciary duty, making sure that businesses and investors can continue to consider all financial risk in their decision making, and even efforts such as decarbonization. As you can imagine, some of those conversations didn't go as well as we intended. However, we were able to build long relationships with some of the folks that are here on stage with me. I'll let them introduce themselves. Andrea, do you want to start?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Andrea Yodsampa. I am the CEO of Deploy US. We are a bipartisan organization, deeply bipartisan staff and bipartisan board, focused on advancing durable, ambitious U.S. leadership and policy on climate and clean energy. But our strategy is focused right of center and specifically supporting the eco-right field of organizations that can credibly and effectively engage conservatives on this issue to scale.
I'm Eli Lehrer. I'm the president of the R Street Institute. R Street is a multi-issue think tank devoted to free markets and limited effective government. We started as a spin-off of the Heartland Institute in a dispute over climate change.
Hey, good morning. I'm Brandon Arnold. I'm with National Taxpayers Union. We are a taxpayer-focused organization that advocates on behalf of the American taxpayer at all levels of government, local, state, and where I spend the majority of my time at the federal level working with members of Congress. Again, these are taxpayer-based issues that involve taxes, tariffs, healthcare, spending policy, and increasingly some of the issues that we're going to be talking about here today.
Well, and thank you all for being here, for making the trip. So Andrea, with all the issues that we're here to talk about today and more broadly here at Climate Week, from freedom to invest to decarbonization to broader climate issues, how can conservatives really take a leading role as a part of what seems to be a more politicized world that we live in today?
So Andrew, thank you so much. And I really want to congratulate Ceres for having this conversation and this series of panels. It's timely and very important. I think where I'll start is by saying that there is no path to durable policy without bipartisan support. That is a fact. It has been a fact for a while. Yeah. And I think that the environmental movement, which I come from, is starting to really wake up to that in a different way right now, given the current realities. And that's a really good thing. I think the question maybe in people's minds is it achievable? Given the politicized context of our country and around these issues, is there actually a path, though, to achieve bipartisan engagement and on these issues in particular, but we focus on decarbonization? And the answer is absolutely. Much, much more possible than the headlines would make it appear. And it is because, one, climate and clean energy have been misbranded as a progressive issue alone. On their merits, they are not. And that's true for other issues as well. That misbranding and the hyper-politicization around these issues means, and I heard Senator Whitehouse talk about trust, there just is not the trust necessary for left-of-center environmental organizations to do the full lift alone with the current administration and Congress. I think that's obvious, but it's really important to land that point. Who can do it? It is the ecosystem that is credible, right of center on this issue, the leaders and voices and organizations that can credibly engage the administration and members of Congress, especially Republicans, around these issues. And that's not the left in this country at this particular moment. It is certainly business leaders and investors, and Ceres has been at the forefront of engaging them. But it also includes what we describe as the eco-right field. So this is an ecosystem of nonprofit organizations across the country, many of which are led by political conservatives, including folks on this stage, that is committed to leadership on climate and energy and able to authentically bring this into conversations with Republican policymakers and constituents. That ecosystem has historically received less than 1% of climate philanthropy, which says a lot. So one of the opportunities that I want to elevate is the critical importance. This ecosystem is on the critical path to U.S. leadership on climate and clean energy, and deserves this kind of elevation and much more support. And I really want to acknowledge Eli and Brandon and the panel that follows of former members for being part of that ecosystem.
All right, thanks so much, Andrea. So Eli, how does the freedom to invest fit into the broader philosophy that you have at R Street? You know, Andrea had mentioned bipartisanship, but how, in your mind, can conservatives really take a leading role in this?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question, and thank you to Ceres for having me here. As an evil conservative, I wake up every morning, stroke my monocle, put on my top hat, and think about profits first and foremost. Isn't much else to think about, really. The fact is that people should be able to pursue profit, should be able to pursue innovation, should be able to pursue creativity any way they want to. We don't know, nobody knows in advance what's going to work. That's why markets work. If investors are denied the ability to invest based on what they think is best, not what some bureaucrat thinks is best, not what some politician thinks is best, that will significantly reduce the opportunities to make profits, to have a market that functions, to have a free market, to advance human flourishing. And anything that interferes with that is a big problem. And it's a problem when people on the left do it. And the way the laws are being written, it's perhaps an even bigger problem when people on the right do it.
Yeah, thanks so much. You know, Andrea did mention the path forward. What do you think is a way that, you know, conservatives and also liberals can work together to really push the issues that we care about forward?
So there are a lot of ways that conservatives and liberals can work together. Sometimes it's a matter of realizing that people do have different goals, but those goals can be sympathetic in many ways. Promoting equity and outcomes, that's a sympathetic goal. It's not the one that I would put first and foremost, but I understand why people on the left would have that goal. When it comes to the issue of climate, I think there's tremendous opportunity, as Andrea said, for bipartisan collaboration, because ultimately the solution to the problems of climate are not going to come from bureaucrats are not going to come from politicians. They're going to come from creativity and free markets. No really complex problem in human history has ever been solved by somebody on high decreeing this is exactly how we're going to solve it. It's been solved through self-organization, through creativity, through advancements in technology, through advancements in science. And these are things that conservatives traditionally have been all about. And there is tremendous opportunity to do it. My major goal when it comes to climate change is to get a lot of people on the left to do the things that I favor to do anyway.
Thanks, Eli. So Brandon, working for an organization that's focused on taxpayer issues, what brings you here today? I know that we have worked together in the past on the economic impacts that this legislation has on taxpayers. But what brings you here to talk about your organization and the freedom to invest?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me, first of all. Well, fundamentally, I think this is a taxpayer issue. Or let me rephrase that slightly. It ought to be a taxpayer issue. I'll give a quick example of why I don't think it is as big a taxpayer issue as it ought to be. And that is, I did a center-right radio program a while back, and I was talking about the nuances of ESG and investment and so forth, and how the government shouldn't put its thumb on the scale in one direction or another. And we were talking for a few minutes, and finally the host paused me and said, "Brandon, wait a second here. Are you pro-ESG or anti-ESG? I don't get it." And it kind of dawned on me there that we have become a society that is so polarized, that is so red team versus blue team, that we can't see this issue in a nuanced fashion. We can't see that the real North Star when it comes to government policies here, in my humble opinion, ought to be protecting taxpayers, doing what's best for voters and the public here, instead of trying to use the power of government to bend it to our particular policy agenda. And that's really, I think, why the freedom to invest is so important. But I think it gets back to the basics here. People should be free to engage in ESG investing as individuals, as private companies, and so forth. They shouldn't be forced to do so as a pension recipient or so forth. So we need to kind of take the government's thumb off the scales here, allow markets to function properly, allow individuals and businesses to operate as they see fit, and for once to lay down our arms in what has become this culture war in which we see the other side as an enemy rather than as a potential partner, as a potential ally that we can work together on towards some mutual goals to benefit society.
So I had asked Andrea about the polarization effect, and you had mentioned backstage about some of the comments that you received from a Fox News op-ed you wrote on this issue. How can conservatives really push for the need for bipartisanship when it comes to this issue, but also broader climate issues as well? Yeah, you alluded to it. I had an op-ed in Fox News last year. It's when Texas starts acting like California. The first rule, whenever you write an op-ed, never look at the comment section. Never look at the comment section. I broke that rule, and there were some very unpleasant things said about me. Some of them were true, but very unpleasant things said about me there. They don't like me very much. But yeah, listen, I think the goal here ought to be, setting the North Star for this conversation. If it is just a matter of Democrats are in charge, so we're trying to bend the federal government in one direction, and then 4 years later, Republicans are in charge, and we try to swing the pendulum in the other direction, I think the American public is really going to be left at a disservice there. We need to have some degree of bipartisanship. We need to set goals here that are mutually beneficial for Republicans and Democrats. We need to get past some of this divisive rhetoric that's just red team versus blue team, because the end game of that is not a happy place, I don't think, for a red team or blue team. Well, I appreciate the three of you joining me here today. On the screen behind me is a QR code. Please visit freedomtoinvest.org. And thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed our panel. All right.
Bye. Please welcome to the stage Ann Kelly, Vice President of Government Relations, Ceres.
I am just thrilled to be having this next conversation with three climate champions, all of them Republican, former congressmen, Bob Inglis, Carlos Curbelo, and Ryan Costello. Thanks so much to all of you for being here. We're going to move quickly because this is a quick segment and we don't have a lot of time. Bob, my good friend, it's so good to see you. You know, you recently published an op-ed some of you may have seen in Fox News calling out Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, for mandating investments instead of calling for protecting the free market. And I'm wondering, as a conservative Republican, what's your sense of the need for Republicans to stand up for the freedom to invest?
Well, you know, I think we're in the midst of a populist purge, and sometimes that purge ends up with some principles sort of maligned and really messed up. And so the thought that conservatives would be behind an effort of stopping a free enterprise firm from deciding how to market itself, it's just a crazy notion. I mean, it doesn't fit with conservatism. What Eli Lara was just saying is so true, you know, that a company needs to have the freedom to decide, yeah, try this. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But you don't have to go get government approval. That's a Soviet system, you know? So really, it's quite a, but the question is, how long does purge last, and when we come back to ourselves? I think it's coming.
Do you have some specifics you can offer? Because I was about to ask you that. Where is the trend? Do you feel like more of your conservative colleagues are listening to your message?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see people realize that the populist purge has some real problems with it. You know, when you try to cancel Jimmy Kimmel, there's really like something rings in the memory about, wait a minute, people are supposed to be able to say what they want to say. And then conservatives sort of join with good-spirited liberals and say, wait a minute, no, this is not the way we live. And so this is the moment, I think, in what this freedom to invest is so crucial in an American system that we're the innovators of the world. And to have somebody sort of trying to direct companies from a position as Attorney General of some state, that's a really weird spot for a conservative to be.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Bob. Carlos, you have been a climate champion for a very long time. Our office gave you an award for your bipartisanship back in 2015. You were part of the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, and you've started the Climate Solutions Foundation. I'm wondering, what is your sense, thinking broadly about what Republicans need to do when it comes to climate and clean energy advocacy? And again, picking up on the investment question that Bob raised, you know, what is your guidance for your conservative allies and especially your moderate Republicans on this front? What should they be doing and saying?
Sure, and look, I think we've come a long way. For a long time, this conversation about the environment and climate was about sacrifice and what humanity and businesses and individuals needed to sacrifice. As the conversation has become more about opportunity, it has become so much easier for conservatives and Republicans to embrace these issues. And by the way, you know, on the surface, there's a lot of noise and a lot of bad news, but once you dig a little bit, you find that in Congress, there continues to be growing consensus for some of the ideas that Bob just expressed, that the government shouldn't be involved in instructing companies or investment firms or individuals in what kind of risks they can take into account when they invest, what opportunities they seek when they invest, but also that, you know, this clean energy transition is a wonderful opportunity for good paying jobs, for investment, for people to have more economic freedom, for people to take advantage of the energy that God sends us every day, right? Through the sun, through the wind, and many other forms of energy. So I have found that whereas before, you know, there's a little bit of climate denialism, but in my view, that was never the challenge on the right. Apathy was the challenge on the right. Most Republicans just didn't feel or think that this issue was important to them. They thought it was all risk and no potential reward. But as they're seeing more and more investment in their districts, as they're learning more, this has become a wonderful economic opportunity. And I think that's what's helping build some of the consensus that we're seeing, again, beneath the surface, because if we just focus on the surface, it's not a great time. But I think if we dig a little deeper and we kind of see some of the dynamics in Congress that get less attention, it helps us be a lot more hopeful and optimistic.
Well, I appreciate that last comment, because we know there's a much bigger world beyond the headlines, and Senator Whitehouse alluded to this. Are you confident that there's actually some constructive bipartisan conversations going on between staffers that presumably, about the economic opportunity of clean energy, about possibly a CBAM?
Definitely. Look, I think probably the best thing this Congress could do for the American economy and for energy, which, by the way, when we talk about energy and the economy, it's the same thing, right? Prosperity is so connected to energy security and the availability of reliable, affordable energy. Permitting reform. If this Congress can deliver permitting reform that introduces certainty into the energy markets, right? There's so much uncertainty, and let's be fair. The previous administration kind of arbitrarily froze liquid natural gas exports. That was not something that made sense to me. Obviously, this administration is arbitrarily putting a hold on important projects that are going to help keep power bills low for people all over the country. So if Congress can reassert itself, reclaim some of its Article I powers and bring some stability and predictability to the energy markets, permitting reform can definitely deliver that. We know it has to be bipartisan, so that's a very big opportunity, I think.
Well, now that you mentioned permitting reform, I want to pick up on what Senator Whitehouse said. I'm not going to put any of you on the spot, but later I'm going to invite any of you to comment on the criteria that Senator Whitehouse offered, which is that projects that had fewer emissions would be prioritized for streamlining. But you give that some thought. That was not part of our remarks earlier. Ryan, thank you so much for your positioning with regard to the clean energy tax credits within the IRA. You, like many Republicans, many existing House Republicans, promoted preserving those clean energy tax credits. And I just wonder if you can comment on, why is it that either the for or the against, do you see more Republicans being able to get behind the opportunity of clean energy for economic reasons, as Carlos suggested, and also the investment element of that? Is there a sense that investors should be able to invest in clean energy solutions?
I think the answer is yes. I think Carlos hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is a market opportunity. The best way to maximize a market opportunity is to have policy certainty, a regulatory framework that investors can understand. And through the history of capitalism, technological innovation introduces new concepts. Those new concepts ultimately prove themselves to be commercially practicable. And tax policy and investors kind of follow that. And I think that we're at that moment in time, and I think that that's what the IRA tax credits represent in large measure. Some of it is, more demonstration projects, but some of it is like technology that works. It reduces carbon emissions. It creates economic development opportunities in parts of this country that experienced a downturn as a consequence of previous kind of industrial revolutions. And so I think it's a tremendous opportunity. And interestingly, there are a lot of, I don't like to use the term Republican districts or Democratic districts because we're one country, but if you look at where the opportunities are around the country, a lot of them are in Republican districts, and you increasingly find industry at the table negotiating for either inclusion or preservation of a lot of the tax policy which leads to market innovation and which leads to what we're refer to as a cleaner economy.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for saying that, because one of the things Ceres does is to bring those industries to Capitol Hill to have those constructive conversations with lawmakers. I think I mentioned earlier 170 plus meetings with the Republican side. I'm curious for each of you, and why don't we start with you, Ryan, what are the best arguments folks should carry when they're meeting with those Republican offices? And they're business people, they're investors, they're trying to make the most compelling case possible in this moment. And I'm curious about what they should say and maybe what they shouldn't say. What is ineffective? Any thoughts?
Candidly, referring to climate as an existential crisis is like, if you're in a Republican office, they're going to be like, okay, it's just not the language that Republicans use. I think this is important for job creation, This has been proven from a technology perspective, actually the single most important thing is we have more demand for electricity in the next 15 years, and we need to get more resources onto the grid, and these tax credits represent investment opportunity in creating a more resilient and reliable electricity future for this country. And if we don't secure that, two things are going to happen. Electricity prices are going to go up. We are going to be less geopolitically competitive because there are other countries that just throw stuff on the grid and manufacture things a heck of a lot cheaper than us, and we need to remain competitive in that regard too.
Will you come to hell with us sometime? That's exactly what we need to say.
He's there a lot.
Carlos, your thoughts? Same question.
If you are a company and you are innovating, investing, I would like you to tell Republicans that you are trying to make as much money as possible for your shareholders. Republicans need to be reminded, need to understand that the clean energy transition is perfectly aligned and compatible with capitalism. If we want to succeed as a nation, if we want to grow, what do entrepreneurs need? Energy. Now more than ever, right? With AI and data centers and electrification, we need energy. So this is about fueling capitalism in the most efficient way possible. That's what Republicans need to hear. Now, there are a lot of Republicans who will also appreciate the environmental benefits and understand that, again, the environment is the economy. It's the same, right? In South Florida, where I'm from, we invest so much in Everglades restoration. If we don't get that right, it's going to hurt our economy, right? It's going to hurt the flow of fresh water into Florida Bay. It'll kill the bay. The fishermen will suffer. The restaurants will suffer. The tourism industry will suffer. It's all connected. So there are many Republicans who will also appreciate the environmental benefits, but I think what brings most Americans, certainly conservative and centrist and center-left Americans, is this idea of economic prosperity and growth and opportunity, and I really think that's what Republicans need to hear.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. Bob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, we all live in Missouri, apparently, the show me state. So the first thing to do is to show them that something is out there that works. And that's what a lot of companies here can do. The other thing to do is not to suggest that we need to, that we're all going to die next Tuesday, or that we must repent of the capitalistic system, or we must walk and eat bugs. Don't go there if you're going to Republican offices. Talk to them about how this is incredible opportunity. This is like creating more energy, more mobility, more freedom. It's just going to be faster, better, and cheaper, and cleaner. And we can do that. We're the innovators. And so it's what Ryan and Carlos are saying. It's that totally different language. The language of the left is about protection and nurturing. The language of the right maybe is what Eli Lehrer was talking about earlier, about going out and just making a profit and figuring out how to do human flourishing. And so it really is this connection between free enterprise innovation that actually delivers the environmental benefit. But just understand the audience. And as Ryan said, use the right language is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really wish we had more time, and we're going to keep this conversation going as we do our work. Please join me in thanking our three colleagues this morning. So people right out.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Well, we need more like them. That's absolutely sure. The case, but we could talk more about that. This concludes the Ceres program for this morning, and thanks so much for your attention. If you're interested in what we talked about, you can go to ceres.org or freedomtoinvest.org for more information. We'd love to connect with you. Ceres is going to continue on the policy front. We're going to continue on the Freedom to Invest front. There's lots of good work to be done. I hope you're leaving inspired, and I hope I get to talk to you throughout the day. Thanks so much for joining us.